My wives are dead, I added brusquely. Both of them. I expected the comment to shut her up, but I doubt even that would have worked had it not been for the appearance of our white-coated waiter. His name was Rinaldo, and his accent was definitely Italian. He came to the table prepared to take orders for the Starfire Breeze's second dinner seating. What with one thing and another, it took a long time for everyone to place their orders, and I welcomed the breather. As long as Rinaldo was quizzing the ladies over their dining choices, the blonde had no other option but to leave me alone. I knew that once she tackled me again, I'd be forced to admit the ugly truth. That I was on the Starfire Breeze for one reason, and one reason only. To serve as my newlywed grandmother's chaperon. I'd feel so much better if you'd agree to come on the honeymoon with us, Beverly Piedmont Jensen had said to me a number of weeks earlier. Lars and I are both getting up there, you know. If anything did happen to go wrong, not that it will, mind you, I wouldn't worry nearly so much if you were along to take charge of things. Getting up there was something of an understatement. When my grandmother stepped onto the gangplank of the Starfire Breeze, she clocked in at a spry 86, soon to be 87. Her new husband, Lars Jensen, is a year older than she is. My new step-grandfather also happens to be my AA sponsor. The two of them had met months earlier doing KP duty after the memorial service for my dead partner, Sue Danielson. That acquaintanceship, struck up over washing and drying dishes, had led to a whirlwind romance. Beverly had lobbied for living in sin and not disturbing the Social Security and retirement arrangements left to her by my late grandfather. Lars, a retired halibut fisherman, had convinced her that he had salted away enough money to take care of both of them in their old age, whenever that might occur. Beverly and Lars had tied the knot at a simple ceremony in front of a justice of the peace. Lars, who still regretted never having made good on a promise of taking his deceased first wife to see his old haunts in Alaska, was determined to treat his new wife better than he had his previous one. Their honeymoon cruise on the Starfire Breeze had been Lars' idea. Having me along as aide-de-camp was Beverly's, although to give the man credit, Lars never murmured a word of objection. I'd like to help out, but I don't do cruise ships, Beverly, I had told her. I'm a pitiful sailor. I'd be so sick you and Lars would end up taking care of me. I was afraid you'd say that, she responded brightly, but I have just the thing. She had opened her capacious purse and dug through it for some time before extracting her trump card, a small, rectangular, clear plastic container. She handed the box over for my inspection. On top were the words, Travel Aid. What's this? I asked. Bracelets, she declared. If your watch gets in the way, you may have to stop wearing it for a day or two. I'm supposed to take off my watch and wear these? I demanded. What for? Why, to keep from getting seasick, of course. I've checked with several people, including the pharmacist at Bartell's. They all swear these things work like a charm. And although I hadn't been much of a believer, I had to admit they were working. Once we exited Queen Charlotte Strait, we had hit rough waters. The Starfire Breeze was making her way north through the kind of swells that in days past would have had me barfing my guts out. But here I was, sitting down to dinner and planning to enjoy myself. All I had to do was survive Margaret Featherman's updated version of the Spanish Inquisition. Rinaldo swept the table clear of all but one of the menus, and then disappeared again. I braced myself for the next assault, only to be spared by the arrival of our missing table-mate. Sorry I'm late, a male voice said. I decided to take a before-dinner nap. I must have gotten carried away with the sleeping bit. My name's Mark Alley, he added. That's Mark with a C, not a K. I felt an instant affinity for the guy. Here was some other poor, unfortunate soul who, like me, had spent a lifetime having to explain his name to every stranger he met. Across the table from me, Margaret Featherman brightened instantly. I stood and held out a hand in greeting, which is when I noticed that he, too, was wearing the telltale Travel Aid bracelet. Obviously, Mark Alley and I had more in common than trouble with our given names. I'm J.P. Beaumont, I told him. Most people call me Beau. Stumbling over trying to remember all the women's names, I hesitated for only a moment, but that was long enough for Margaret Featherman to jump in and resume control. "Naomi Pepper?" she said, indicating the somewhat plump woman just to my right. Naomi's softly curling brunette hair was flecked with gray. Mark nodded. "Glad to meet you," he said. "And this is Sharon Carson." Sharon was an attractive-looking woman with silver hair pulled back in a French twist. Her ready smile had an easy grace about it. "How do you do?" she said. "This is Virginia Metz," Margaret continued. Virginia wore her red hair in what would have passed for a military regulation buzz cut. "And I'm Margaret Featherman," Margaret concluded with a triumphant smile. "So glad you could join us." Outside the movies, I'd never seen a classic double-take until Mark Alley did his, the moment Margaret spoke her name. "You're not, by any chance, related to Dr. Harrison Featherman, are you?" he asked. "As a matter of fact, I am," she answered with a disarmingly bright smile. "Or at least I was. Harrison and I were married for 20-some years. We aren't now, of course." "You know him, I take it?" "Know him?" Mark exclaimed. "He's my doctor. He's the man who performed my brain surgery. I used to have terrible grand mal seizures, sometimes 2 or 3 a day. Since the surgery, I haven't had a single one. Dr. Harrison is here on the ship to discuss the procedure and its after-effects with a group of other neurologists from all over the country. That's why I'm here, too. He dragged me along as his Exhibit A, so to speak." "Are you saying Harrison is on this very ship?" Margaret demanded. "Yes," Mark told her. "You mean you didn't know that?" Margaret shook her blonde mane. "I had no idea," she said. "What a coincidence." The other women at the table exchanged discreet but knowing glances. Clearly, none of them believed a word of it. And neither did I. During dinner, I did my best to hold up my end of the conversation. That wasn't too difficult, since I was no longer Margaret Featherman's principal target. That dubious honor was now bestowed on poor Mark Alley. From the moment Mark sat down at the table, I suspected that Margaret had every intention of using him to tick off another notch on her bedpost. The tipsy looks Margaret beamed in Mark's direction were about as subtle as a fully loaded Mack truck, and about that enticing. Reynaldo and his assistant waiter, an attentive Portuguese named Jean, were delivering the creme brulee when Naomi Pepper, the woman sitting next to me, leaned over and whispered, "If Mark hadn't shown up, my money would have been on Jean to get lucky tonight. As things stand, I'm betting Mark is it." That little bit of byplay was enough to draw Margaret Featherman's sharp-eyed attention. "Wait a minute, you two," she said. "What's going on over there? No secrets allowed." "Don't work yourself into a lather, Margaret," Naomi said. "I was just asking Mr. Beaumont here if this was his first cruise." "First one ever," I responded brightly. "If this is how they feed us at every meal, no one is likely to starve." Margaret was looking straight at me when I started to answer, but then her eyes wavered, and her glance slid away. The back-and-forth movement of her irises told me she was watching someone make his or her way across the room. From the tightening of her bare shoulders and the downturned stiffening of her lips, I could tell that this new arrival was someone Margaret wasn't thrilled to see. "Mother!" "Why, Chloe," Margaret Featherman responded enthusiastically, "how wonderful to see you." I looked up and saw at once that Chloe could be none other than Margaret Featherman's daughter. She was a blonde, unreconstituted, and younger, early 30s version of her mother, but the resemblance between the two women was striking. "What the hell are you doing here?" Chloe Featherman demanded. "I'm taking a cruise," Margaret returned, "and don't be so rude. Say hello to my friends. You know this is the time of year when we always get together. We usually spend the week in Reno. This time we decided to come cruising on the Starfire Breeze instead." Chloe Featherman glanced perfunctorily around the table and nodded briefly to each of the women seated there. When her eyes reached Mark Alley, who was fumbling to his feet, napkin in hand, her jaw dropped. "Mark," she exclaimed, "what are you doing here? You were supposed to sit at the same table with Dad and me and some of the others. We're upstairs in the other dining room." I am so sorry," he stammered uncomfortably. "There must